The sunlight peeked through the tall windows of the big old building. It was the first day of school at Hartsfield University, a famous place where smart people had studied for many years. Students from all over the country walked through the halls, feeling a little nervous and excited. Everything felt new, the people, the fast pace, and the big challenge of keeping up with the tough classes. In room 204, where the advanced math class was held, students slowly took their seats. They whispered, giggled nervously, and waited for class to begin. In the middle of the big blackboard, written in white chalk, were the words, Advanced Calculus 1 Dr. Lillian Hawthorne. Dr. Hawthorne was known for being very strict and very smart. She didn't like lazy students, and she never gave easy compliments. To her, a classroom wasn't a place to relax. It was a place to work hard and prove you deserved to be there. Mistakes were pointed out quickly, and no one got praise unless they truly earned it. The door opened quietly, and almost no one noticed. A man walked in, not drawing attention to himself. He wore dark jeans, a plain black shirt, and his hair was a little messy. He took off his sunglasses slowly, revealing focused eyes. He walked to the back of the room and sat down. He looked older than the other students. Instead of a laptop or phone, he carried a thick old black notebook. It was Keanu Reeves. A few students recognized him. They glanced at each other, surprised. But no one whispered or made a fuss. They just wondered, why was he here? Was this for a movie? A documentary? Was he practicing for a role? But the strangest part was, he looked like he really wanted to be there. Before they could think more about it, the door slammed shut, loud and firm. Dr. Lillian Hawthorne entered the room like a commander walking into battle. She wore a perfectly pressed gray suit and walked with confidence. Her high heels made soft clicking sounds on the wooden floor. She stopped at the front of the class, turned to face the students, and stared at them for a moment. It felt like she was scanning each person, looking straight through them. "Welcome to reality," she finally said. Her voice was strong and cold. "This is advanced calculus. There's no room for excuses, laziness, or arrogance." The room fell silent. "At this university, hard work is the only thing that matters," she continued. "I don't care if your father is a billionaire. I don't care if you went to a poor school. I don't care if you have millions of followers online. The only thing that matters here is how well you use your mind." She paused and looked at a student in the front row. The student quickly looked down, nervous. "Or how well you will learn to use it," she added. Keanu sat still, showing no reaction. His eyes were on her, not in defiance but with deep focus, like someone studying and analyzing everything. "Some of you think being famous means you don't have to work hard," Dr. Hawthorne said, this time glancing toward the back of the room. "That cameras and attention can replace discipline. But in this classroom there are no shortcuts. You can only stay if you prove you belong." Her words were clearly aimed at someone. But Keanu didn't react. Not a blink, not a flinch. He simply turned the page of his notebook as if he had heard similar words before, from different voices in different places. Minutes passed and the lecture continued. But something felt different in the air. It wasn't just about math anymore. It was about something unspoken, a silent game of power, intelligence, and patience. When class ended, students gathered their things, still thinking about Dr. Hawthorne's words. But Keanu stayed seated for a moment, calmly finishing a note in his notebook. Then he stood up, walked to the door, and left quietly. His presence was almost invisible. And that's when Dr. Hawthorne truly looked at him for the first time. Their eyes met. For a brief second, it felt like two worlds had collided. She was a symbol of authority, strictness, and control. He was a mystery, quiet and unreadable. No one in the room knew it yet, but the silent man sitting in the back of the class was about to change everything. Not just for that class, but for the way people understood what true knowledge really looked like. The next class came faster than anyone expected. Some students arrived early, as if they knew something exciting was about to happen. The air wasn't just filled with math lessons anymore, it was filled with curiosity. Keanu walked in again just a few minutes before class started. He held his notebook, walked to the back, and took his seat. This time, more students noticed. A few whispered, and one girl nudged her friend. "He's back," she whispered. Keanu sat down calmly, crossed one leg over the other, and opened his notebook. Same seat. Same calmness. Dr. Lillian Hawthorne entered exactly on time. Never early, never late. "Let's not waste time," she said sharply. "I reviewed your diagnostic exercises. Most of you need to understand something very simple. Memorizing formulas won't save you. You either understand math or you're just pretending." Her voice was sharper than the first day, like a blade being sharpened. The students sat up straighter, listening closely. Instead of jumping straight into the day's lesson, she paused for a moment. There was something unspoken between her and the room, something challenging. Keanu sat silently, his fingers resting lightly on his notebook. He was listening. And Dr. Hawthorne knew it. Something was about to happen. Something more than just math. She walked away, but before leaving, she said something important. We live in a time where everyone thinks their opinions are facts. People post quotes online and think they understand science. She walked across the room slowly. But math doesn't care if you're famous. It doesn't care how many movies you've made or how much people love you outside these walls. She didn't say his name, but she didn't have to. Then something surprising happened. A hand rose in the back of the room. It was Keanu, calm, polite, almost hesitant. The room went quiet. Dr. Hawthorne turned to him slowly, her face hard to read. Yes, she asked. Keanu waited a moment before speaking. His voice was soft but clear. I was just wondering why we aren't focusing on the actual lesson. You said this class was about math, not opinions. The room was completely silent. Dr. Hawthorne smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives before they attack with words. And what makes you think you can question how I teach, Mr. Reeves? Your experience in Hollywood? Dodging bullets in slow motion? The students laughed nervously. Some looked down, not wanting to be part of it. The words could have been hurtful, but Keanu didn't react. He stayed calm. No, not that. I just think math isn't about opinions. It's a tool to understand the world and find patterns we don't even notice. Something in the room changed. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. He spoke with confidence, not arrogance. A student whispered, "That didn't sound like an actor." Dr. Hawthorne stayed still. "Interesting," she said, her voice flat. "But math isn't just about pretty words." "I agree," Keanu said simply. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It felt like something important had happened. Some students started to see Keanu differently. He wasn't just an actor. He was something else, something harder to define. Dr. Hawthorne felt it too. She had been challenged, not by someone trying to show off, but by someone who truly cared about learning. She cleared her throat and turned back to the board. "Let's get back to work," she said. But her voice was different, colder, sharper. Not because of what he said, but because of how calm he stayed. She started teaching again, writing quickly, speaking faster than usual. Keanu didn't say anything. He just took notes, filling his pages, not just with answers but with ideas, questions, and different ways to solve problems. Other students struggled to keep up. One girl closed her notebook, already overwhelmed. But Keanu kept writing, deep in thought. When class ended, the air felt heavy. Something was unfinished. Dr. Hawthorne gathered her things quickly. But before leaving, she turned around and said, "Some people think being quiet makes them wise. But sometimes silence just hides ignorance." She looked straight at Keanu. For the first time, something flickered in his expression. It wasn't anger. It wasn't an offense. It was something deeper. A quiet warning. The next class didn't feel normal. There was tension in the air, like something big was about to happen. Students arrived early. But this time, they weren't staring at Keanu because he was famous. They were staring because they were curious. Because something was happening and they didn't want to miss it. Keanu walked in right before class started. Quiet as always. Same seat. Same black notebook. But this time, Dr. Lillian Hawthorne was already in the room. She stood by the chalkboard, arms crossed. She didn't say hello. She didn't tell them to open their books. Instead, she picked up the chalk and started writing. Not words, numbers, symbols, equations. The board filled up fast with something huge, complicated, and scary. By the time she stepped back, the entire board was covered in math that looked impossible. It wasn't from any textbook. Some students looked lost. Others tried to copy it down, confused. Keanu just sat there, staring at it, hands resting on the table. Then she spoke. Her voice was cold and sharp. "This kind of problem separates real mathematicians from people who just play with numbers. It's not in your books. It's not in your lectures. It's not even in your study guides." She turned to the class, but her eyes locked onto Keanu. "So, who wants to try?" Silence. She let it stretch. No one moved. "How disappointing," she said. Then, like a chess master setting up her winning move, she added, "Mr. Reeves, maybe you'd like to try, since you seem to know so much." The room froze. Some students turned to look at Keanu. They couldn't believe it. Was she really calling him out in front of everyone? Keanu didn't react at first. He just looked at the board again, studying it carefully. Then, slowly, he closed his notebook. He stood up. A few students gasped. Someone whispered, He's actually going up there. Keanu didn't look at anyone. He just walked forward, not dramatic, not showing off, just focused. Like he knew this was something he had to do. When he reached the board, he didn't touch the chalk right away. He just read the equation, following the patterns, seeing the deeper meaning behind the numbers. Dr. Hawthorne took a step back, arms crossed, watching. She was sure she had just set up a moment where he would fail. The class was completely silent. Keanu picked up a piece of chalk. He held it for a second, thinking. Then he started to write. But he didn't go straight to solving the equation. He started in the corner of the board, writing something different. "This looks like a hidden limit problem mixed with some tricky geometry," he said softly, not to show off but to explain. The students leaned in, interested. He wrote carefully, step by step, breaking it down, showing his thinking. The room stayed silent, but this time it wasn't because of fear. It was because everyone was paying attention. As he went through the problem, Keanu pointed out a mistake. "You've made a wrong comparison here," he said, circling a section on the board. "If you look at this part as a growing function instead of a single number, you'll see the issue." Line by line, he explained, his handwriting neat and sure, like someone who had done this many times, not just to solve problems but to teach others how to see math differently. He connected the logic to famous mathematicians like Euler and Ramanujan, even mentioning Noether's theorem. What we're really looking at isn't just solving for x. It's about understanding why the limit doesn't exist unless you change the way you look at it. The students started, not at the board but at him. He made difficult math sound simple. One student, a quiet girl who rarely spoke, slowly raised her hand. I think I finally understand what a limit really is," she said shyly. Keanu turned to her with a gentle smile. "That's the point," he said. "Math isn't about just memorizing steps. It's about noticing patterns and feeling when something is right or wrong." He used a word that surprised them, beautiful. Math beautiful? Somehow, in that moment, it made perfect sense. He finished the last step of the problem and the class began to clap. At first softly, then louder, until it became almost like applause. But Keanu didn't bow or act proud. He simply handed the chalk back to Dr. Hawthorne. She hadn't moved. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes showed something new, doubt. For the first time, her authority had been challenged. And not by someone arguing with her, but by someone who clearly knew the subject deeply. She didn't say thank you or comment. Instead, she simply turned and erased the entire solution without a word. The chalk dust fell like snow. Keanu returned to his seat, quiet and calm, but something had changed. No one had expected him to not only answer the challenge but to turn the problem into a lesson they would always remember. The next class wasn't just another lesson. It felt different. Students who used to be bored were now arriving early, notebooks open, eyes full of curiosity. And when Keanu Reeves walked in, calm as always, notebook under his arm, the room went quiet. Then the door opened. Dr. Lillian Hawthorne walked in with her usual grace, but there was a stiffness in her movements, like she was holding something back. She placed her books down without looking at anyone and started writing right away. "Today we move to vector-valued functions and partial derivatives," she announced, her tone flat and sharp. "This isn't high school math. If you don't keep up, you'll fall behind." There was a warning. In the middle of explaining a problem, she suddenly stopped and turned to the back of the room. "Mr. Reeves," she said, her voice controlled but pointed, "since you seem to enjoy teaching, perhaps you'd like to explain the gradient of a scalar field to the class?" There was another challenge. But this time, Keanu didn't hesitate. He stood up, walked to the front, and picked up the chalk, not with a showy attitude but with quiet confidence. He looked at the board for a moment, then spoke. "Think of the gradient not just as a direction," he said, drawing a simple diagram, "but as the path nature would take if it could move freely, like how heat spreads or how gravity pulls things down." He kept drawing as he spoke, connecting math to real-world things, mountain slopes, weather patterns, even how water finds the fastest way downhill. When you climb a hill, the gradient shows you the hardest way up, but also the fastest way to the top, he explained. A student whispered, "Why does that make so much sense?" Another followed, "I've never heard it explained like that before." Keanu kept going, making it clearer and clearer. He never tried to sound smarter than anyone, he just helped them understand. Then a quiet voice spoke, "I think I finally get it." It was a girl from the front row, one of the students who rarely spoke. Keanu turned to her, smiled gently, and said, "That's what matters. Understanding, not perfection." Dr. Hawthorne stood beside him, watching. She had spent years being the smartest person in the room, the one who controlled everything. But now, Keanu had taken that space, not because he wanted to, but because the students wanted him to. He handed her the chalk and returned to his seat without a word. She stood there for a moment, then started erasing his work again. The chalk dust floated down as she resumed her lesson, but now she was speaking faster, less carefully. And something had changed. Students kept looking at Keanu as if waiting for him to explain things again. The magic was gone. Class ended early. As students packed their bags, one girl nervously approached Keanu. "Do you tutor?" she asked. He blinked, surprised, then nodded. "I can stay after class if anyone needs help." A few more students hovered nearby, unsure, then joined. A small group began forming, not around him as a celebrity but around someone who made them feel capable and seen. And Keanu? He gave his time freely, not to impress anyone but just to help. That was how it all started. What began as one math problem turned into something much bigger than any of them had expected, including Keanu himself. Room 204 was full before class even started. There were no more whispers, just quiet focus, as if everyone was waiting for something important to happen. Keanu was there as always, sitting in the back, notebook open, calm as ever. But now, every eye was on him, not because of his fame but because of what he had done. Then, right on time, Dr. Lillian Hawthorne walked in. Her posture was perfect, her face carefully controlled, but there was a storm behind her eyes. She didn't greet the class. She didn't waste time. She walked to the board and began writing a long, complicated equation. Then she stopped. Slowly, she turned to the back of the room. "Mr. Reeves," she said, her voice carefully even. "You seem to enjoy being the center of attention." The room froze. Keanu looked at her but didn't react defensively. His expression stayed calm. "I'm just here to help," he said simply. She took a step forward. "You're not a teacher. You're not even a real student in this course. So tell me, why are you really here?" She had said it. The challenge was clear. The students held their breath. Keanu stayed quiet for a moment. Then finally he answered. Keanu closed his notebook gently. "I love math," he said, "and I believe anyone can understand it if someone takes the time to teach." Some students looked at each other. That wasn't just an answer, it was something deeper. But Dr. Hawthorne wasn't ready to give up. "Or maybe," she said, "this is just a new act for you. A smart guy pretending to be normal." Keanu stood up, not to argue but with respect. "You challenged me in front of the class and I answered. That's what teaching is about, right?" The room went quiet. Then the classroom door opened. The university dean walked in. The air suddenly felt heavier. "I heard this class has been quite interesting," he said with a small smile. "Mind if I watch?" Dr. Hawthorne nodded, her lips pressed tightly together. The lesson continued, but the tension stayed. Then Keanu raised his hand. "Professor, may I show a different way to solve this problem? Not to compete, just to help." Dr. Hawthorne hesitated. She looked at the board, then at the students, then at the dean. Finally she said, "No, this is my class. I don't share my board with outsiders." The students murmured, not surprised but disappointed. Keanu took a deep breath. "With respect, Professor, you challenged me before everyone. And now you don't want to face the same challenge." She turned sharply. "Are you calling me a coward?" Keanu stayed calm. "I'm saying the way we lead is how we are remembered." The room froze. The dean watched but said nothing. Everyone knew what happened next would show the truth about Dr. Hawthorne, not just as a teacher but as a person. Dr. Hawthorne clenched the chalk tightly. The dean remained silent, waiting. Then she broke the silence. "Enough," she said, her voice shaking. "I won't be embarrassed in my own classroom." Keanu stood still, not angry, just calm. "No one wants to embarrass you," he said kindly. "We just want to learn. Isn't that why we're here?" She stared at him. There was anger in her eyes but also fear. Keanu walked toward the board, slow and respectful. He reached out his hand. After a long pause, she handed him the chalk. He turned to the class. "Let me show you this problem in a way you can see it, not just calculate it." Then he began to teach. He used colors, simple shapes, and pictures. He showed how the numbers moved, how they behaved, like the path of a falling leaf or a car rolling down a hill. The students leaned forward, their eyes wide, nodding as they finally understood. "Math isn't about proving who's smarter," he said. "It's a language. If someone doesn't understand, maybe we just need to explain it in a different way." Then the room burst into applause, not just polite clapping but real, heartfelt applause. More students peeked in through the open door, drawn by the excitement. Some sat on the floor, others stood along the walls, listening in silence. Keanu wrote the last step, clear and simple. Then he turned to the class. "Knowledge should never be used to make some people feel less. It should be a bridge so we can all move forward together. There was silence, then another wave of applause, louder this time. Not for a performance but for a gift. Dr. Hawthorne didn't move, but something inside her had changed. She was no longer just a teacher in that room. She was a witness. Keanu walked back to his seat in the last row as if nothing had happened. And yet everything had. A few days passed, but room 204 had changed. A student had secretly filmed Keanu's lesson, and the video spread quickly across the university. Not because of who he was, but because of what he had done. It wasn't just about math. It was about helping people feel smart again. The next class was full of quiet tension. No one knew if Dr. Hawthorne would even come back. But she did. And something about her was different. She still stood straight. She still spoke firmly. But her eyes, they didn't search the room for a fight anymore. She stood at the front for a long moment. Then she took a deep breath. "Before we start," she said, "I need to talk about the last class." The room went silent. "I made mistakes," she admitted. "I let my pride get in the way of my purpose. I forgot what this classroom is really for." The students looked at one another in surprise. She turned to the back of the room. "Mr. Reeves," she said, "I want to thank you." Keanu nodded, humble as always. Dr. Hawthorne hesitated, then stepped aside. "Would you be willing to help me with future lessons? I think there's real value in mixing deep theory with the clarity you bring." The room was stunned. Keanu stood. "Only if we do it together," he said. "Not as teacher and guest. Just two people who want to help others understand." She smiled, genuinely for the first time. From that day on, something changed. Dr. Hawthorne still taught theory, but she made space for new ideas. Keanu didn't take over. He simply filled in the gaps. Students who had struggled before started to do well. They asked more questions. They believed in themselves. And the university took notice. Other departments started rethinking how they taught. The math department updated part of its curriculum, adding pictures, group discussions, and student-led lessons. And Keanu? He never moved from the back row. He was never on the faculty list. He never asked to be. But he showed up for every class. And when a student was stuck, he'd sit beside them, quietly helping them see the patterns hidden in the numbers. One afternoon after class, a young student stayed behind. "Why do you always sit in the back?" she asked. Keanu smiled. "Because from the back I can see who needs help the most." That was his secret. Because in the end, the real privilege isn't knowing more than others. It's using what you know to help everyone rise together. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more exciting stories filled with adventure, mystery, and unforgettable moments. Your support means the world. It keeps these stories coming and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.